What if I told you that the next Cold War won't be fought with nuclear weapons, but with algorithms? That the balance of global power is shifting, not because of armies, but because of artificial intelligence. This is the AI arms race, and today on the Geopolitical Pickle, we break down how AI is reshaping geopolitics. Welcome, Juanfrey. How are you doing?
I am fine, Ronan. Such a somber beginning. What are we talking about?
So, I wanted to start with that because I actually asked ChatGPT to help me create this episode outline structure, and it suggested this cold intro to the episode, and I think it is kind of a scene setter for where we're going to go across this AI discussion across this episode, which will be far-reaching. But first of all, I just want to see what your understanding of AI is.
Well, first of all, I just want to say that as much as AI will develop, it will never be able to replicate my problems with English. I'm sorry, but my accent and my constant mistakes in butchering the language will not be replicated. Apart from that, AI has been in our lives not for too long, but it's definitely made an impact already. And it's interesting because I don't know of anyone that doesn't use any sort of a language generator at today, be it ChatGPT, be it Gemini. Now, for example, the use of Grok. I'm a Twitter user, and I call it Twitter. The use of Grok, for example, is really extended already within the Twitter community. Funny enough, it calls out
Elon Musk is the largest spreader of disinformation.
Yes. But definitely it's the topic of today, and it's going to be the topic of the future.
Absolutely. And I think that's a good place to start. So I think when we're talking about AI, obviously artificial intelligence, this is not something that's been new to the consciousness. This has been around in science fiction since early 1900s even. This thought that we could create this robot or cyber system that could think independently of humans. And what we have now, as you said, is these large language models developed, and I guess the poster boy of which and the first mass available model being ChatGPT back in end of November 2022, and it kind of exploded onto the world scene and people's consciousness, I guess, around January 2023. What this is different to, I guess, the concept of AGI being artificial general intelligence, which is when that AI model can then develop itself and develop some sort of reasoning and thinking pattern to basically work on par and then eventually overtake that of humans. I think importantly, it is actually better at some tasks already, especially like pattern recognition, different things like this, than human beings are right now. And the technology is evolving very quickly. We see developments all the time, new GPT models, but other competitors bringing out competing models. As you said, Grok, I think what prompted me to think about this episode was DeepSeek, which I'm sure everybody's heard of, the Chinese answer, I guess, to these American tech funds, and basically the introduction of which tanked the stock market a little bit. But if we think back to May 2023, I don't know if you were aware of this, but there was an open letter signed by Elon Musk and around over 1,000 other tech entrepreneurs, basically trying to say we need to put a pause on AI to understand the risks better, if you remember that.
Yes, I remember.
And I think part of that was coming from a very self-serving point for Musk while he was developing his own AI in the background. So his talk about we need a pause on his competitors obviously had...
You knew that Elon Musk was in the beginning of OpenAI and then he left the project?
He was basically kicked out of the project, even though he says he left. So this is part of the reason which was driving, I think, because ChatGPT was the first to the market and became really extremely highly valued on and bought out by Microsoft and all these other things because it was first. But subsequently, we've seen obviously Google coming out with their own, Grok, DeepSeek, and then a host of other smaller ones which all serve different purposes. And I guess what these people in the letter were scared of, and what in AI circles is known as P-doom, the probability that we could bring about the doom of humanity through AI, which could be from something as simple as, I think there's an AI rationalist group that use this paperclip example, and they say, okay, we ask the AI to generate as many paperclips as possible in the most efficient way, and in doing that, set off a chain of events where it's like, we actually don't want humans interfering with this task, so we end up bringing about the end of humanity through AI. And I think this is kind of seems ridiculous at face value, but is more a thought experiment and is used as this justification for people to bring about their P-doom, the probability that we're going to wipe ourselves out. And everyone has their own, all these AI people have their own P-doom number where they say, okay, 95% chance this is going to end up destroying humanity, or on the other end, we have people that say there's no chance. And I think most consensus now is it's definitely the lower end of the scale, so we shouldn't be too scared. Also, it's not going away. This is something that we're going to be living with, and is kind of, I would say, one of the major disruptors of the way that the world works, on par with the invention of the internet, at least, if not much more in the future as it develops.
I mean, it's crazy. I was thinking that it's crazy that within 100 years, humanity has developed at least two ways of destroying itself: nuclear weapons, and now an actual functioning AI. I don't know. I find it really telling of the massive developments that we've seen as a species in the last 100 years, because of the potential that they have to both things, both nuclear energy and AI, the potential goods that they have for the development of societies and so on, but also the downside of how dangerous can they be, not being regulated properly, or being developed with that consciousness of the environment that they are developed in. And this brings us, I think, to the first part of our discussion, that is this competition that there is, this AI race that there is, because there are different perspectives put or backing the development of AI in different parts of the world.
Absolutely. So if we think about this as the AI race and an area of competition, we have a few major players. Obviously, the US has these big tech corporations, very much private companies, but we've seen as part of Donald Trump's his first announcement, I believe, in the White House was to announce $500 billion investment in Starlink, which was basically going to be going towards data centers and different things like this. Because when we think about AI, right now you need huge computing power. As you said, it has very much significant environmental impacts. But you need these massive data centers which require a lot of power. So then you need the energy infrastructure to support that. And we've seen China also develop their own energy infrastructure across the last 10 years, as well as having really large data centers in surplus of what they needed at the time. So they have definitely they position themselves very nicely for having this development within China. We've seen not just DeepSeek, but Alibaba has come out with its own AI. WeChat, I think, all these big Chinese tech companies have all come out with their own AI models in the same way that we see different tech companies in the US doing it. So definitely they're the two leaders of the space at the moment. And I think part of that was the competition. And as part of that competition, we saw the governments take very different approaches. So we saw in the US under Biden, the CHIPS Act trying to limit Chinese access to high-end chips, the semiconductors required to power these AIs. And then DeepSeek claimed to be able to do it with much less computing power than other models, and using human capital as a way to restore their competitive advantage. And then as a response to the CHIPS Act, they have their own strategic advantage in the field of developing extracting rare earth elements which are required for these chips.
Exactly. I think this is the most important part. Well, in my opinion, the two most important takeaways for understanding what is the situation right now in this AI race is understanding who's developing faster and in a more comprehensive way. And as you've mentioned, the Chinese have been developing these data centers for a decade now. But it's also the availability of these rare earth minerals that are needed to create all this infrastructure. And these rare earth minerals are basically mined by China. 70% of all rare earth minerals are mined by China. It has near monopoly of several of these rare earth. 90% of all rare earth processing happens in China or with Chinese machinery. Whereas the nearest competitor, which is the United States in this case, it's only at 12%. And other actors may be the European Union, or I want to add here the common suspects, Russia, India. Their capacity clearly is limited to the availability of these resources for them to create any sort of infrastructure.
And I think also, like when we're talking about AI, because of these huge costs of development, I think we see this widening gap between the haves and the have-nots. US, China, on one side, we see also European Union trying to mobilize funds now for AI. France is taking quite a lead there. They have their own GPT model called Mistral, but they were able to, well, Macron held a large AI meeting in Paris recently. They mobilized 50 billion in funds from the Middle East, for instance, to develop data centers and this sort of stuff. Obviously, France has quite a good developed nuclear energy infrastructure to be able to power these data centers. So they're looking at ways that they can compete as well. And they also, the EU has quite a different approach to AI. They want some sort of regulatory framework around the use.
The EU doing the EU, which is we regulate and then we develop.
Exactly. So that you can see the different perspectives on how this is playing out already.
I mean, it is interesting because also the use that you give to this AI is at odds in the different actors. For example, in the US, as you were mentioning, there's the big tech corporations that arguably, especially with this Trump administration, they are devolving into a sort of oligarchy within the American government. Therefore, it's in question what will this AI be used for, because I assume, for example, in the case of Grok, it will eventually be captive. If it keeps on saying that it's a creator is the biggest spread of misinformation in the platform. In the case of the EU, there is this push now, sponsored by Macron, to invest in AI, but they are more wary of the potential downhills that this development may have for the well-being of the population or for the use of data of the population. The EU is really invested in protecting personal data, and this is something that, obviously, being it a supranational entity, it has to deal with many smaller entities that may have different perspectives. In the case of China, for example, it's much more centralized, because in the end, if the regime decides that they want to develop AI for X purposes, in case of China, we can point out as surveillance plans or AI-powered cyber warfare. They are clearly, it's a unitary idea, and it's a unitary way of development.
I mean, definitely. And if we think, obviously, back to 2022, Xi Jinping basically ostracized some of these tech leaders from the government circles. Like Jack Ma, the founder of Alibaba, was not seen in public for a long time.
Yes.
And just earlier this year, we saw a very public showing of Xi Jinping bringing these tech leaders back in and saying how important they are to Chinese industry and growth. And I think this really highlights the state-centric approach of China. They're trying to work with these tech companies to give them a competitive advantage. So now I think if we're talking about AI, I want to go through some of the specific places where we could see it go and be useful for a government, not just in terms of on our personal level here to use ChatGPT for all sorts of different things. But I think there's a few specific ways which it is going to help shape the shape of war, and as well as the economic side of things, as well as even the social systems that we have today. If we think about traditional domains of geopolitics. I think we've talked about this before, but we have obviously the land domain, the sea, the air, expanding to space domain during the Cold War, and now this cyber domain. And I think AI obviously belongs in the cyber domain, but it's going to impact all the others as well. It's kind of the first major technology, I would say, that does this all-encompassing thing. So to start with, let's look at the battlefield, basically how AI could be used in warfare and how it could change future warfare.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, for warfare, the image is clear. You have autonomous weapon systems, and you have be it drones or robots. For example, there was this famous I don't know if you got to see it, but it was this video of somehow of a kind of dog with a fire thrower that came from China.
I mean, this was
it's literally straight out from an episode from Black Mirror, to be fair.
Black Mirror was made about this.
Yes, it literally the shape is so similar.
Yeah.
That it was a little bit scary because I remember watching that episode, and that episode was scary. But obviously, targeted drone strikes based on AI, which are right now already being in place, and they've been for a while. But basically, the AI what was doing was finding the targets, and then there was a human that still had to decide whether the target was to be targeted or not. Or, for example, it's been said that it's been applied in Gaza now by the Israeli military, where they've asked the AI to generate targets, basically, and then they would point at these targets. It will also be helpful in the coordination of attacks, for example, because they can be coordinated from the beginning with AI, and then it can be put into practice. So in warfare, it's definitely gonna make it it's gonna make war more automated.
Definitely. I think we already see some of I think Raytheon, for instance, the US tech military company, developing systems to be fitted out to fighter jets, which would be able to predict incoming missiles way before human capabilities, detect their flight paths, and then deploy whatever necessary countermeasures against the specific missile attack that's incoming. For instance, this is one really practical example is being developed now in addition to these targeting systems. Then we also have that role in the military decision making. So AI is going to be used to help develop war plans, enhance the speed of which you can make decisions on the battlefield as a commander. It'll be assessing all of these radar images, detecting the movements of the enemy troops, and giving you guidance on how to best counter this attack. And obviously, the other side will also have their own AI model running the same thing. So it becomes kind of this competition between the two AI models about which is better able to assess the situation, which is in real time, and give actionable intelligence to the military commanders. And I think this is already starting, and it's going to continue to become much more relevant, as well as, I mean, the third major pillar would be the cyber warfare and AI driven hacking operations, where we can see you can potentially disrupt opposition forces or even their communications, all sorts of these pillars of being able to fight a war using AI disruptive technologies.
I mean, in the end, it would be AI would be used to try to predict the enemy's mood before they even make it, no? If a general wakes up to an AI-generated war report and the decision to strike is made by an algorithm, then will you take the shot? Or will it need to still be reviewed by humans, which are not as capable as the AI?
I think at the early days, it would always be reviewed by a human. And then as the trust in the AI increases, we'll see that shift to being almost completely autonomous systems being deployed that can basically fight the warfare using tech rather than human capital almost.
Or imagine in the case of Ukraine, focusing, let's say, Russia and Ukraine are focusing in the battlefield, in the physical battlefield, with engaging with drones, engaging with tanks, whatever, and Russia has the nuclear deterrence there always, but you design an AI model that is able to enter the cyber defenses of Russia and basically disarm a huge percentage of their of their nuclear capabilities. This is definitely something that there is the possibility of it happening for sure.
Absolutely. And I'll go back to what the AI wrote for me in this episode plan for the big takeaway from this segment, which is that war is no longer about brute force. It's about speed, intelligence, and automation. And AI is the ultimate battlefield advantage. And I can't really argue with that.
AI prompting at itself, like it's giving it.
It definitely is speaking very highly of itself, but I can't really argue with its points there. And moving away necessarily just from the military and warfare aspects of it, I think the next segment which we can touch on is the economic side of it, how it's going to disrupt and change the global economy.
Yeah, I don't know. Have you ever seen, there's this show that I used to watch that's called Love, Death and Robots.
Yes.
And there was an episode where they basically developed an AI in a yogurt. Like it was a sentient AI in a yogurt. And it came up with a plan to finish with it was in the United States, obviously, to finish the US debt within X amount of months, and that they needed to follow these specific steps for the US to finish this debt. And the AI says, okay, if you follow exactly what I'm telling you, this is what's going to happen. The president of the United States says, haha, well, whatever, sure, we'll put it in practice. They don't put it in practice the way the AI says, and it ends up in total chaos, and the yogurt ends up taking over the US government because it has a plan to solve it. Definitely, without going into the fiction, it is clear that with AI models and with supercomputers, especially once they add quantum computing to AI, it would not be such a fictional thought to have economic plans developed by AI-powered systems that are more accurate or that they are able to predict better the downsides of economic policies than the actual.
I mean, this is already happening. So we see in stock markets, for instance, the AI being able to predict the future and in real macro time, much faster than a human could do the assessment, buying and selling stocks to maximize economic output. But also there's a few other distinctive arenas where it's really already being used and is going to continue to become even more disruptive. For instance, like in terms of resource extraction, being able to accurately model under the ground where the large veins and the most economic deposits of different resources are. In terms of agricultural production, like maximizing the utilization of the land and being able to basically get the highest yield of crops per square meter or whatever it is like that. In terms of responding to disasters and disaster relief and management, this can also be really automated. And even in the medical sphere, we see AI being increasingly used and rolled out and being much more effective. I saw a study that said a new AI model can predict breast cancer from screening almost 6 months before any human is ever possible. And it's like indetectable changes to human eyes, but it's detectable by the AI there. And I think, again, that's a really concrete example of how it's going to disrupt the existing way that we do things in positive way in a lot of instances. So that's why I'd say AI is not all negative at all. There's also positive use cases.
I mean, I know, for example, I know from a friend of mine who's developing AI systems for crop production, and they use technologies that already exist, and they feed these technologies into AI models that they keep on having to train in the end, because for now, as far as I understand, there is no pure AI thinking. You feed information to the AI, and then, as you were explaining in the beginning, the AI interprets this.
Exactly.
And right now, for example, they are aiming to be able to detect whether if crops, like just with a drone from and with a couple sensors, they will be able to distinguish which crops are being healthier than others, which ones can be taken. They will be able to address any source of plague or whatever happening in the crops much faster, which will definitely improve the production of any agricultural of any agricultural production, and make it safer and make it cheaper.
Yeah. I mean, and this is already happening in other areas as well. Like we can see the AI being able to optimize even traffic management systems within cities, optimizing grids. The other crucial area where this is going to really become disruptive in the economic sphere is for the labor component of specific industries. I mean, if we think back to the first industrial revolution, we saw a massive change in the way people operated. We had people coming out of the fields because we had tractors and these other large different things which could become more efficient. And there's some, like, I like to go back to the example of truck drivers because AI is a huge component of how autonomous driving works. I mean, they have to be able to predict millions of different calculations the same way that a human does, and oftentimes better, because a computer doesn't get tired. A computer is able to stay focused 100% of the time, for instance. And truck drivers, for instance, in the US, about 3.6 million people are truck drivers. Over 1% of the population. Is the largest industry, the largest profession in the US, I think. And largest or second largest.
Walmart worker.
And as soon as we have like a proven autonomous driving for trucks, everybody's going to want it. These trucks are going to be able to be operating 24 hours a day. The AI, again, doesn't need a break, doesn't need to be paid for time off. It doesn't need any of these things. So suddenly you have 3.6 million people which almost lose their jobs, not overnight because it will take some time to roll out, but within a short space of time. And this is just one industry that will see this massive shift away from the traditional way that humans interacted with it to becoming something different. And this is raising really big ethical questions about how you manage people then, because again, this is going back to the same time of the early industrial revolution when you needed less people to do specific jobs. I think it creates new jobs for sure, but these are going to be highly advanced jobs. The skills required to do some of these,
and they're going to be less in numbers.
And they're going to be less in numbers, precisely. So I think it's going to be quite disruptive. It has the potential to really become a major disruptor.
I mean, for that, I'd say the European Union and China are better positioned to handle this situation than, for example, the United States is. Because in the United States, without the subsidies, without economic incentives, without economic support for people that are unemployed, for example, if you lose your job, in the end, it's going to be disruptive for the society in itself. It's going to create problems in the streets. Whereas countries like China that are already, they have the planned economy, they can think about this in advance. They can replace it with minimum wages for the people, or with
universal basic income, something that's been floated around for a while.
And it's definitely, this is what I've been thinking about the most with AI. And it's that, in my opinion, we are not at a political level. It's not being understood properly, the impact that this is going to have at the social level. We live in a work-based system where you work, you earn, you pay. Consumption. Now, if you stop working, because why working? Like, okay.
Because 3.6 million truck drivers are losing their jobs.
Exactly. And it's like, it's something that will happen. We've faced, as you mentioned, we've faced this before in the past. We faced this with the industrial revolutions. We faced it with mechanization of the industry. So far, society has been able to cope with it and change work jobs from one area to another. But with AI, there is the potential of, at the same time, losing so many positions. Like, you go from translators to truck drivers to a reduction of the workforce in the health system, for example.
Corporate environments as well. People are already seeing massive reductions in workforce because AI is able to work with a human to subsidize having so many people on staff.
Exactly.
As well as other industries, even journalists. We've seen a lot of big publishing sites cutting their staff massively in favor of increased utilization of AI to supplement.
Because for data analysis, for example, I mean, in the end, if you have AI for data analysis, like, you can reduce your workforce.
Exactly. I really think there's not going to be many fields which are spared. I mean, programming, AI does a fantastic job of programming. So this is going to be, I 100% agree. I think this is going to cause huge social disruptions. And then one other economic aspect, to go away from this social, because we've touched on obviously how it could be utilized even to drive stock markets and increase productivity in different sectors. then there's social aspects, but then finally the geoeconomic implications we see. As I said right at the start, I think it's going to increase the difference between the countries that have and the countries that have not. But we already see this battle over AI playing out in the geoeconomic arena through tariffs, through restrictions. As we go back to the start, obviously Biden's CHIPS Act, which was expanded by Trump and was Biden's last act in office, basically was to increase the restrictions placed on Chinese firms accessing US highly advanced semiconductors and chips. Then we see the Chinese response, first of all, banning the export of some of these rare earths. Now they've gone further and banned the export of the extraction technologies of these rare earths because, again, they're able to do it significantly cheaper than any other country. And I think we'll see like different spheres of the earth become more specialized in specific aspects of what's important within the AI world, and basically more barriers going up across these lines to increase your advantageous position using these geoeconomic tools. So I think that is definitely another kind of arena which we see this already starting to take place
and it's interesting because only states with a certain capacity can participate of this.
Correct.
There is no, I mean, you're not going to ask Sudan to
exactly. I mean, a lot of these African countries have many of the raw materials needed for the AI, but they don't have the state development and industrial base to be able to utilize that. And so then we see even potentially more exploitation and again this
more dependency
and this growing divide between the rich countries and the poorer countries across the world.
I mean, that's for me is the big takeaway, apart from obviously the dark side of AI, as I see that AI wants us to talk about. Obviously there's the dark side of AI in terms of surveillance, in terms of AI-driven authoritarianism, which is it was really this topic until not that long ago, but definitely be it through surplus of information. I mean, choose your dystopia. You can either control the population through proper policing and authoritarianism, or you can just flood the information sphere with so much disinformation that it just becomes unusable for the average user and even for an experienced user.
Absolutely. I mean,
it's so difficult.
Well, let's go to the takeaway here for the economic side from AI. It says, forget gold, forget oil. The new economic superpower will be the country that owns the best AI.
It's data.
Data is the new currency going forward that the world will be reliant on. And yet now let's go, as it has directed us, to the next segment on the dark sides of AI in terms of surveillance, end of privacy, and other things such as the effects that it's going to have on democracy itself. I think with disinformation, with different deep fakes and disruptive means of propaganda distribution. I mean, we obviously have a whole series on disinformation from back in the back end of last year. I recommend you listen to that to get basically a bit of a background to the geopolitical impacts of disinformation. And then we can talk now about how AI is going to bring that about.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, as the takeaway said, forget gold, forget oil. The new economic superpower will be the country that owns the best AI, I would add, because of its data. In the end, when you control the data of your population, and with this we come to disinformation, one of the ways that you can use AI, and it's already being used right now, is for sentiment analysis. You can analyze through monitoring social media, through monitoring public speeches and so on. You can already there's analysts, humans, that can analyze this and can analyze trends. But definitely with AI, it will make it so much more accurate. It will make it so much more easy to predict shifts in population in population sentiment, and then predicting this manipulated for your own benefit through disinformation, through the fakes. Right now, we are reaching an era, a time, in a really short period of time, we're reaching a moment where deep fakes are objectively really difficult to find.
Some of them you need highly advanced AI to be able to detect the AI.
I'm gonna give you an example of Spain recently. After the floods that were happening in October, the president of the region said that some months later said that he arrived to the center of management of the emergency at as a set time, and he provided a picture of him arriving to this place at a set time. Well, it took 1 month to find out that this picture was fake. Like they had faked the picture. This was, I don't think it was done with AI, or at least it was not done much with AI. It was properly like a picture that was modified. Now, this idea already is in the mind of people, and you need to go and convince them that this person arrived to this place at the set time because he said it and provided a picture. Just imagine with one that you create, just imagine if you create hundreds of them. Just imagine if you create hundreds of deep fakes telling you that your government, like your president with a voice, with whatever, telling you that, I don't know, you've been, I don't know, there's been some riots in this place motivated by this group of people.
Absolutely.
The impact that will have, the immediate impact that will have, and that we are already seeing without AI being fully used for this purpose, to me it's scary, because in the end, most of the population don't have enough time, or won't even give themselves enough time to properly double check whether the information that they're receiving is right. What will it happen when actually checking that this information is right or wrong becomes so difficult that you need a proper AI system to decipher the AI produced information?
Absolutely. I mean, this flooding the zone tactic is being used by Russia even before AI. I know, again, back to the Disinformation project, we covered a lot about the Sahel and how Russia had massive amounts of data output there to basically flood the zone with so many stories that it undermine any sentiment towards France whatsoever, and enabled them to basically insert authoritarian dictators from the military that are very sympathetic towards Russia. But going towards even a European example right now, which brings me to this question, which ChatGPT uses a teaser for a next episode, but I'm going to include it now, which is next time we dive into how AI is changing elections. Can democracy survive artificial intelligence? Okay. And for me, this is the fundamental question. Because if we look at Romania, last year in December, I think they had their first round of elections, basically for the new presidency, and a relatively unknown person suddenly became the second largest candidate and made it to the runoff. And it was basically came out that he was running with massive support from Russian propaganda farms, churning out AI on TikTok, on Instagram, on all these various platforms to be able to bring him to prominence, and then hopefully for them instate him as the president, so that Romania then becomes very sympathetic towards Russia. This goes back to the question, how does democracy survive? Democracy was not invented in a time when social media was present. Democracy is not designed for a place where you can have foreign actors influencing your domestic situation in such a tangible way to affect your foreign policy. This is really going to then undermine your own sovereignty when you have an external actor able to use cyber domain to, instead of invading your country through a physical situation, can invade the cyber domain. And this is why when very right-wing people in America were expressing outrage, including Elon Musk, J.D. Vance, at what Romania did, which is constitutional court banned this guy from running. They were 100% right to do this. This is the only way to fight back against this spread of disinformation, because otherwise you don't have a democracy. If you allow a foreign power to come in and undermine your elections to instate someone that they want to be the president through this manipulation of the environment, then what is the point of a democracy? And you're basically forfeiting your sovereignty to a foreign power. And I say, okay, this is really at the heart of it. These disinformation wars are such a political minefield going forward. And this is not new. I mean, Russia also was heavily involved in 2016 election in the US, but the scale of it is completely different when we talk about the AI ability to basically flood the zone with information.
I mean, there's clearly has to be something. Something has to be done in order to defend that democratic rule. And I think we are out of ideas, to be fair, because it is really difficult. In the end, democratic rule is democratic, and this means carving down some of our rights. Because in the case of Romania, for example, these people that then had the intention of voting for this particular person, right now you need to convince them that what this person was doing was motivated by Russia, had the money, had whatever. And we live in a time of deception. I say we live in a time, although I do believe this has happened before, and this is a constant thing. This is human nature. We can be deceived, and then it is really difficult for us to understand and accept that we were wrong and that we were deceived. For me, the most difficult part is this second one, is explaining or making people understand that they were deceived. And that is so difficult that I don't really know how democracy can get through it unless there is some sort of educational resilience. Like since we are kids, we are taught how to spot these lies, how to analyze the information that we receive, which is something that is not happening as of today, at least in the country that I know.
But additionally, if you have to be educated from a child to be able to spot this, and obviously it's evolving so fast, so to keep up with the technology is very difficult as well. But if you're having to do that from a child, we're 80 years behind the 8 ball, we've got all this voting block of people which are not trained on how to be aware of these different things and realize that potentially their perception was manipulated by a foreign power trying to implement and undermine their democracy. So I think this is a massive problem. By the way, the Romanian presidential candidate was Călin Georgescu.
Yes.
But this is like just the tip of the iceberg. This is the first time we've seen basically a democratic country fighting back against this AI manipulation of the information space and propaganda, which, again, the problem is inherently, what is our democracy going to look like going forward? It was not invented in a time when we had this ability for foreign actors to be able to infiltrate. It was maybe much more subtle. If you wanted to change the perception of a country, you had to either own the media there, potentially, which is costly and very transparent, or you have to have people on the ground, potentially some sort of spies or things like this, which, again, is going to have much less impact than this overarching flooding the zone with disinformation and propaganda and all these other things. So I think the real question then comes to what our democracy we want it to look like going forward. Do we want this to be such a vulnerability? I think for China, obviously, they can promote their own message. For the US as well, it's from all sides. This is just Russian specific because they have been very active in this field for a long time. But I think it would be naive to think that many other countries are not already.
If it's been done in the past without AI, just imagine the potential of it being done with AI.
Exactly. So I think this ability to generate deepfakes and propaganda en masse, which is so convincing, is immensely problematic. And I think this is like the dark side that we see going down. What about the question here that the AI posed? It says, imagine a world where you can't tell what's real. AI isn't just changing warfare and economics, it's changing truth itself. And I think that's very pertinent to this point. It's not just a tool, it's a weapon, and it's not being just used on the battlefields, but also in our daily lives. And this really goes back to that point about how it can be used to basically cross-border attack without any physical intrusion.
So, I really want to follow this. I like this. So where does this leave us? AI is transforming geopolitics faster than we can regulate it. The question isn't whether AI will change global power. It already has. The only question is who will control it.
Great question.
It's a great question, and I think we don't even need to put it in like who will we control it by, because it doesn't really matter. Well, it does matter who will it control it at a global scale, but also how will your own control it. what will your own do with it? Like, what will your government do with it? How will you be able to carve down information, the information sphere, which for me is the most important area for, and we are seeing it in the case of the current war situation in Europe, where there's been a lot of disinformation launched to the European Union in order to basically divide its population, from promote this sort of discrepancies within its population that lead to revolt, that lead to riot, that lead to the state being having problems with sovereignty or with legitimacy over the population, which I think is where in this case Russia is playing his best game. I think throughout the war in itself, well, it's not really, we can all agree again, it was going to be 2 weeks, it's 3 years now, but definitely the clear attempt to change the popular perception of their own governments within the European Union, for me, is the most critical aspect of the current geopolitical situation that we are in. Because it is so easy in a democracy to get 10, 15, 20% of people in one country to think something that is false, but that is so difficult to prove false, and that the person is telling you, the person that is telling you, or the group that is telling you that it's false, you already don't believe in them because your trust in them has been so undermined, maybe sometimes for legit reasons.
Yeah.
But also because of this spread of overwhelming propaganda. Because it's not just about something telling you, your government is corrupt. No, it's that you receive so much information generated targeting this specific legitimacy of the government or so on, that for me, that is the biggest threat for us in the global scale. Obviously, AI will give leverage to those who can control it and who can make it better. However, I do feel like unlike nuclear development, AI development will need to be within a framework, because if not, even the developers will be in danger of being overtaken by AI. I mean, if you, let's say you reach the sentient AI with quantum computing, okay, you need to measure your chances that the AI is gonna deem you the problem.
So your P-doom number is
it's increasing.
It's increasing. All right. With that, I would like to leave and wrap up with the call to action that was proposed by AI here. So it says, what do you guys think? Will AI be a force for good, or are we heading towards a cyber dystopia? Let us know your thoughts and reach out to us here at the Geopolitical Pickle.
And remember that we have the Pickle Gazette, is a newsletter that we release bi-weekly. You can find us on Substack, or on Substack you can also subscribe to get it in your email. It's completely free. However, if you want to help us with a subscription, it will definitely help the viability of this project. So thank you very much. Thank you, Ronan.
Thank you, Juan, and a very interesting episode on AI, and we'll catch you next time on the Geopolitical Pickle.
Ciao, ciao. The Geopolitical Pickle is created by Ronan Wordsworth and Juan Francisco Muñoz. Follow us on Instagram at The Geopolitical Pickle or Twitter at The Geopickle for more content, and follow us on every podcast platform.